Revenge with Karen. I knew we were in for disaster the moment Mark Talbot pointed at my chair during the Monday morning all-hands and said, "What exactly do you do here anyway?" He wasn't joking. He said it with that smug little smile finance guys get when they think a spreadsheet makes them a profit. I'd been at the company 14 years, long enough to see 3 CFOs come and go, one via ambulance after a failed team-building ropes course. But Mark strutted in like he was Vince Lombardi reborn. If Vince thought HR was a threat to free speech and compliance, was a scam invented by women in cardigans. He introduced himself as results-oriented before anyone even asked. Within 48 hours, he'd already cut Friday bagels and tried to merge the ethics hotline with IT support. When someone raised their hand to ask about whistleblower protection, he blinked and said, "If we're all doing our jobs right, why would we need that?" Dead silence. Someone coughed. I took notes. At our first operations sync, he interrupted me twice in 5 minutes. The second time, he waved his hand and said, "Let's skip the admin fluff. We'll optimize that later." Admin fluff. That's what he called regulatory compliance. The only reason our firm was allowed to conduct business across 5 states and 2 countries. Now pause a second, because 97% of y'all are listening to stories like this without hitting that subscribe button. Go ahead and smash that like too. It keeps our whole twisted little storytelling engine running. Mark may not respect paperwork, but we respect your clicks. Anyway, where were we? Right, Mark, mid-peacock strut. He started calling senior employees into closed-door meetings. Whispers about cost alignment floated through the office like a fart in a cubicle, hot, silent, and always headed your way eventually. I noticed he only aligned people with over a decade at the company, usually the ones who didn't kiss ass or laugh at his jokes about millennials being lazy. On Wednesday, I overheard him near the printer saying he could replace half the compliance department with a couple of smart kids fresh out of college and chat GPT. He laughed like it was the cleverest thing he'd ever said. I laughed too, from my cubicle, quietly because I knew something he didn't. You ever seen a man dig his own grave with a $300 Montblanc pen? That was Mark, and me. I was just waiting for the shovel to hit bedrock. See, 14 years ago, when I was still green and the firm was half its size, the original CEO insisted our legal operating license be tied to one named officer. Someone with no criminal history, a flawless record, a personal relationship with every single regulatory agency we dealt with. I was that someone. I didn't brag about it, most folks forgot. Mark never bothered to read the fine print, but tucked deep in my contract was paragraph 12. I hadn't thought about paragraph 12 in years. It sat there like an old landmine under a freshly built parking lot. Useless until someone stepped wrong. And Mark was goose-stepping right toward it, eyes closed, humming his own theme song. By the end of week 2, Mark had renamed the company's Slack channels. Hash operations became hash efficiency zone. Hash compliance got merged into hash admin noise. The man had a PowerPoint for everything except tact. If he could have monetized his condescension, we'd be Fortune 50 by Christmas. He called a war room meeting on Tuesday, his words, not mine, and clicked through a deck titled Leaning the FAT. Slide 1, a stock photo of a butcher holding a cleaver. Slide 2, a list of legacy cost centers. My name was on it, misspelled, of course. Now, I've sat through budget seasons where every line item gets squeezed like a stress ball, but this wasn't that. This was a performative bloodletting, and Mark was holding the knife with a grin. "Let's talk about resource optimization," he said, pacing in front of the projector light like a televangelist. "We really need to spend 6 figures a year on paperwork." That's what he called my department, paperwork. Like risk mitigation, legal audits, and quarterly disclosures, just grew on trees and fluttered into inboxes by magic. He said it to the entire ops floor, standing under a whiteboard where someone had written regulatory cycle deadlines. His eyes scanned the room, landing on me like I was a roach on a clean plate. Hell, could train a bright college grad to do half of this with a week of YouTube videos. No one laughed. That didn't stop him from chuckling at his own joke and tossing a marker across the table like a mic drop. Later that day, I found out he'd already pulled 3 senior analysts into exit discussions. One of them, Candace, had been with the firm since the days of fax machines and folding maps. I caught her in the break room, staring into her coffee like it had secrets. "Said my institutional knowledge was nice but unnecessary," she muttered, like I'm a scented candle. By Friday, there were fewer chairs in the ops bullpen. Literally. Mark claimed it was to encourage active collaboration, but rumor was he had them removed to make people feel more temporary, like we were squatters in our own careers. He held a stand-up that morning and circled my desk twice before saying, loud enough for everyone to hear, still here, huh? I didn't flinch, just sipped my tea and kept my screen locked. But inside, the gears were turning. Paragraph 12 had never mattered until now. I started rereading my old contract, flipping pages like I was looking for treasure. Every word felt heavier. I highlighted the clause, printed it, and slid it into a folder labeled "If he's dumb enough." Spoiler, he was. The final nail? I caught him in the elevator with the VP of Risk Management. He didn't see me step in behind them. Mark was grinning like a man who just got promoted for solving a crisis he caused. "We'll save $500,000 this quarter just off personnel cuts," he bragged. "That compliance chick? She'll be gone by Tuesday. Found a fresh grad on LinkedIn already. Compliance chick. Fresh grad. Like this was an unpaid internship with coffee runs and dog memes." By the time the elevator hit the lobby, I knew 3 things for certain. Mark Talbot didn't read contracts. Mark Talbot didn't understand regulatory law. Mark Talbot was about to learn both those facts, the hard, expensive way. It was a Thursday. Always a Thursday, isn't it? Executives love ending your career just in time for you to ruin your weekend over it. The calendar invite came in labeled one-on-one alignment with a smiley face at the end, because nothing says we're axing you like a cheerful emoji. I walked into conference room 4B at 9 o'clock sharp. Mark was already there, sitting like he owned the air. HR was perched next to him, some poor junior rep named Kelsey who looked like she'd rather be eaten alive by the office printer. A legal pad sat between them. 2 pens. 1 termination packet. He didn't waste time. "Thanks for joining us," he began, not looking up. "Evaluated departmental redundancies and concluded that your position no longer supports the evolving business model." Then he leaned back, crossed his arms, and added, "Frankly, I'm surprised you lasted this long." I didn't say a word, just looked at the pen, then at him. "You're a nobody," he said, and smiled. That was the moment. He wanted a reaction. Anger, begging, anything to validate his little god complex. But I gave him nothing. My face was pure concrete. Errors in compliance teach you how to survive without blinking, especially when some finance bro thinks humiliation is a management style. Kelsey slid the folder toward me. Inside, a 2-week severance offer, a confidentiality clause, and a non-disparagement agreement so vague it could have applied to witches in Salem. I skimmed, signed where needed, and slid it back. "Wow," Mark said. "Didn't expect it to be that easy." I looked him dead in the eye. Neither did I. Smile faltered for half-second. Not enough for anyone else to catch. But I saw it. That faint flicker of confusion when the mouse doesn't squeak in the trap. "Security will deactivate your credentials by noon," Kelsey mumbled, like she was apologizing to the floor. "Your badge will stop working at 12:01. IT will archive your account by EOD." I nodded, stood up, smoothed my blazer. Mark gave me a 2-finger wave. "No hard feelings, yeah." I wanted to say, "You just ripped the engine out of your own plane mid-flight, buddy." But instead, I just smiled, tight, professional, practiced, and I left. By the time the elevator doors closed, I felt it, a flicker of satisfaction, burning quiet and clean like good bourbon. Not because I'd lost the job. Hell, I'd been eyeing the exit for months. But because he didn't know. Not yet. He didn't know that paragraph 12 was more than fine print. It was a fuse. The idiot just lit it with a smile on his face. As I stepped into the parking garage, my phone buzzed. No calls, just calendar updates disappearing one by one. Systems revoking access. Email locked. Internal profile archived. And that meant one thing: the compliance license had just gone dark. The security badge stopped working exactly at 12:01, like Kelsey said. One last swipe at the glass lobby doors, and it gave me that cold red flash. Access denied, that always feels like a middle finger from a robot. Fine by me. I didn't plan on coming back. What Mark didn't know, and what no one in that stale, overpriced conference room bothered to check, was that my deactivation triggered something far uglier than just a dead email login. See, about 10 years back, we moved to an integrated compliance platform, fully automated, cloud-synced, governed by federal and cross-border regs. All live operations had to be stamped, validated, and traceable to a single licensed regulatory officer. That officer? Me. Not the title, not the department. Me by name, by clearance, by registration. And paragraph 12, that was the clause that sealed it in blood. So the moment my credentials were wiped, the system didn't just archive my data. It screamed. A full system-wide no designated officer protocol went into effect. Think DEFCON 2, with less screaming and more transaction lockdowns. Trade approvals, frozen. Contract signatures, rejected. Client fund releases, declined. Digital escrow transfers, hung in limbo. Billing clock stopped. And when I say stopped, I mean dead. We billed by the hour, $80,000 an hour across our high-value services. Multiply that by how many contracts we ran daily, and you get a bonfire of money, igniting in real time. No one had any idea why. They'd built the house, wired the lights, piped in the gas, but I held the keys to the fuse box. And Mark, in his brilliance, had ripped me out without asking who was keeping the lights on. I got home by 12:45, ate a sandwich, checked the mail, deleted the link in recruiter spam like usual. At 1:07, the first domino fell. An old colleague texted me, "Hey, is our portal down? None of the client sheets are validating." Followed by, "Wait, the license token says invalid issuer." I didn't answer. By 2:30, another message came through, this time from a manager in corporate risk. "Is there any chance your deactivation triggered a block? Ops is freaking out." Then 5 minutes later, "Wait, are you the named officer tied to our compliance license?" Ding, ding, ding. But in the building, they were still clueless. Mark was probably leaning back in his chair, he'd on someone's desk, bragging about trimming fat and how he'd saved the company 6 figures in one afternoon. Meanwhile, the system logs were stacking red flags like a Vegas slot machine on meltdown. Every minute ticked by, another 80 grand up in smoke. By the time someone thought to check the compliance dashboard, they were already too deep in the hole to lie their way out. But bless their hearts, they were still trying to reboot the system like it was a damn cable modem. Didn't know yet that this wasn't its problem. It was legal's worst nightmare. By 3:15 p.m., my phone looked like it had won a popularity contest I didn't enter. Ping, ping, ping. "Hey, random question. Did something happen to the compliance cert chain? Is your ID still active? System saying unverified authority on all filings. You seeing this outage? Half our transaction flow just bricked. Are you okay?" That last one was from someone in finance. Quiet guy named Jared who once brought me a cupcake when my cat died. Sweet kid, oblivious but kind. I didn't answer any of them, not out of cruelty, out of strategy. This wasn't a tech hiccup. This was a controlled implosion, and I wasn't about to get pulled into the fire just to save the people who handed Mark the matches. Meanwhile, back at HQ, the noose was cinching. Mark was overheard in the corridor, loud, aggravated, still riding that same train of oblivious confidence that brought us here. "It's IT," he barked. "Some server cache issue. Maybe a token expired. Whatever it is, they'll reboot it and it'll be fine." Spoiler, it would not be fine. See, the license system wasn't some flimsy web app slapped together by interns on Red Bull. It was a locked-down, regulator-audited platform tied directly to the Department of Financial Conduct and the SEC. Designated officer wasn't just a field to fill, it was a registered identity, verified by biometric token, cleared background, and federal fingerprinting. There was no workaround, no emergency override, no IT reset button. Once the system detected that the named officer, me, had been deactivated, it flipped every switch into fail-safe mode. That meant every document waiting to clear, now a paperweight. Every trade pending final compliance sign-off, suspended in limbo. And every client relying on real-time execution, getting angrier by the second. By 4 o'clock, someone had finally escalated it beyond Mark's greasy fingers. A senior partner in legal pinged the whole C-suite. Urgent, compliance license status invalid. Who authorized deactivation of named officer? System states, no active regulatory designate. Immediate regulatory breach risk. Recommend, emergency board session. That moment, Mark was still standing by the coffee machine blaming IT for using cheap offshore contractors. He was about to find out that the only offshore thing sinking was him. Meanwhile, on the 17th floor, risk was losing its mind. Someone tried reactivating my old credentials. Didn't work. License flags detected the tamper attempt and triggered a new lockout. The timer started, 10 to 14 business days to vet and install a new officer. Minimum. Operations was hemorrhaging money, and Mark was handing out Band-Aids like it was a scraped knee instead of a chest wound. One of my ex-teammates texted me at 4:27. They're trying to find a temp compliance officer. No dice. Everyone's freaking. Mark's gone pale. I smiled. stirred my tea, set my phone face down on the table, and waited for the emergency board meeting invite to go out. By 5:12 p.m., firm's lobby looked like Wall Street had a panic attack inside a crate and barrel. Phones were ringing nonstop. Traders were pacing in figure eights like rats in a flooding maze. Someone knocked over the big decorative ficus by reception, and no one stopped to clean it up. The floor's ambient hum, usually email dings and passive-aggressive typing, had turned into full-on combustion. One compliance manager I used to train was sobbing in the hallway, mumbling about escrow failures and regulatory breach clauses. Meanwhile, I was in my kitchen sautéing garlic. Mark, for his part, was spiraling. He kept stomping between departments demanding anyone, get the damn system back up. IT kept saying the same thing over and over. It's not a system issue. It's legal infrastructure. We need a valid license designation. He couldn't wrap his head around it. He thought compliance was just paperwork, something you stamped and sent off to a dusty filing cabinet in Washington. No, it was the oxygen line, and he just snipped it with office scissors. Clients had started calling, big clients, not the handshakes and smiles types, but the ones with entire teams of attorneys who could sniff legal liability like sharks smell blood. And now they were pissed. Their funds weren't moving. Their filings weren't clearing. Their million-dollar trades were stuck in digital purgatory. The firm couldn't even give them a real answer beyond "we're experiencing temporary technical issues." Temporary, that was cute. One of the partners finally snapped and called a few clients directly, tried to stall with charm and nonsense. But the clients had already seen the back end. License invalid. Compliance sign-off voided. One sent an email threatening breach of contract litigation. Another looped in their own auditors. Someone else asked bluntly, "Is your named officer right now?" Dead air. There wasn't one. Back in my kitchen, I flipped the salmon, mashed the potatoes, took a sip of wine, watched the sun drip behind the houses like molasses. My phone vibrated itself halfway off the counter, buzzing with texts, missed calls, a voicemail from someone in legal who'd once called me overcautious for flagging a disclosure typo. Now he sounded like he was underwater and begging for a lifeline. I didn't listen to the end of the message. You ever experience that rare, perfect stillness where chaos doesn't touch you, just spins around you like a tornado too polite to knock on the door? That was me, calm, almost bored. Because when someone tells you to your face that you're replaceable, then detonates their own house by removing the one bolt holding the beams together, you don't rush in to fix it. You just let the roof fall. Mark still hadn't figured it out. He was yelling at legal, demanding they escalate to someone with override privileges. Like this was a Netflix login and not a federally regulated identity system. One poor intern suggested calling the Department of Financial Conduct. Mark told him to sit down before you make things worse. Too late. By 6:30 p.m., 4 C-level execs had been pulled out of dinner reservations. CEO's assistant sent a blast invite for critical operations, licensing emergency session, immediate attendance required. Translation: somebody finally read the contract. The emergency board meeting kicked off just after 7:00 p.m. in the high-rise's 23rd floor glass coffin they call the strategy room. Half the board was remote, dialed in from golf resorts and wine cellars, all wearing that specific brand of wealthy confusion. Tight lips, loosened ties, and iPads clutched like crucifixes. Mark was already in the room, white-knuckling a leather chair like it owed him child support. His face was shiny with sweat, the kind you can't wipe off because it comes from inside, the kind born from realizing you just pantsed yourself on national television and the cameras are still rolling. The CEO walked in last. Didn't sit. Just stood at the head of the table, arms folded, face unreadable. First up was the head of legal, a woman named Joan who usually spoke like a sleepy judge, but tonight had the tone of someone narrating a slow-motion car crash. As of 12:01 today, she began, our compliance license became invalid. We are currently in material breach of several federal and international trade regulations. This affects all licensed operations, including, but not limited to, trade execution, escrow movements, client onboarding, legal filings, and revenue recognition. She clicked a remote. A pie chart appeared on the screen. Red, very red, total estimated exposure from stalled contracts, $7.3 million and climbing. That's as of 6:42 p.m., a pause. The compliance platform cannot be restarted until a new designated officer is verified through regulatory channels. That process takes a minimum of 10 business days. Realistically, 14, if we're lucky. Someone on Zoom coughed. Another muted themselves after muttering Christ. Mark shifted in his seat. Surely there's a workaround, he said, trying for calm, but landing somewhere between nervous toddler and guy bluffing his way through airport customs. Joan turned toward him, one eyebrow raised like a guillotine blade. No, there is no workaround. The license is tied to a person, not a position. That person was removed. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect the company from operating without proper compliance oversight. Mark didn't get it, still. But can't we just call someone? Get a temporary override? Issue an emergency pass? From who, Mark? Joan snapped. The feds. You want us to call the SEC and say, oopsie, we fired the one person keeping us compliant. Mind rubber stamping this so we can keep billing at $80,000 an hour. Someone on the call let out a noise that might have been a laugh or a sob. Hard to tell. The CEO hadn't moved, hadn't said a word. Then one of the external board members, an old banking warlord with a voice like sandpaper, spoke up. Why wasn't this flagged in advance? Who approved this termination? The room froze. All eyes slid toward Mark. He blinked. I made the call, he said, suddenly very interested in his shoes. We were reviewing high-salary roles. The contract didn't mention anything critical. Joan looked like she wanted to throw the projector at him. Paragraph 12, she said, it's literally highlighted. I've seen the contract. You signed off on it. It's on file. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Well, no one told me it was a hard stop. The contract told you, Joan replied flatly. Silence stretched, thick, miserable. The CEO finally spoke. One word, get it. Everyone turned, reached into his briefcase, pulled out a physical binder, my contract, and laid it on the table with a weighty thud. This, he said, this is where the bleeding started. And then, without sitting down, he flipped to the final page and read it aloud. The doors opened with a slow hydraulic hiss, and in walked the CEO, late, unannounced, and radiating that quiet fury reserved for people who only raise their voice when firing generals. He didn't greet anyone, and apologize for being late. Didn't sit. He walked to the head of the table like gravity owed him rent, placed a weathered leather binder on the conference table, and opened it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for old Bibles or execution warrants. This, he said, tapping the page, is the contract that Mark terminated without legal review, without cross-departmental consultation, without a single goddamn question. Didn't look at Mark when he said it. That was almost worse. Joan from legal sat motionless, arms crossed, eyes already glassy with vindication. Someone on the Zoom call muttered, oh no, and quickly muted again. The CEO flipped to a page marked with a crimson post-it. Paragraph 12, he said, voice even, cold. Effective January 3, 2014. All regulatory operations, including licensure, financial conduct validation, client trade execution, shall be contingent upon the active employment status of the designated compliance officer named herein. He paused. In the event of said officer's removal, deactivation, or departure, voluntary or otherwise, the company's operating license will auto-suspend until a new officer is appointed, cleared, and verified by the Department of Financial Conduct and associated entities. Estimated verification time, 10 to 14 business days. He snapped the binder shut. Silence. It was the kind of silence that buzzed inside your ears, made you question whether your heartbeat was audible, made time itself feel like it wanted to leave the room. Every eye turned to Mark. The guy who'd swaggered in 3 weeks ago with a whiteboard full of buzzwords and a personal assistant who called him chief. He didn't blink, didn't speak, could practically hear the realization land in his chest like a bowling ball dropped from a rooftop. The board members looked at him like he was a raccoon caught with a USB stick in its mouth. One director leaned in, voice flat as gravel. Mark, did you know about this clause? Mark opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed. I mean, I saw something about compliance continuity, but I thought, you thought? The CEO snapped, eyes suddenly locked on him for the first time. You thought a federally regulated compliance structure was optional. Joan pushed her chair back slowly, like she didn't want to witness what came next. Mark tried to recover, palms up, words stumbling out of his mouth like they were trying to escape blame. No one explained how tight it was. We assumed the system could be updated. We, the CEO repeated icily. There is no we, Mark. You made the decision. You fired the lock and threw away the key. Turned to the rest of the room. We are now non-operational across 5 revenue pipelines. Client portfolios are frozen. Contracts are invalid. We have regulators circling and lawsuits already being drafted. All because this man, he pointed at Mark, couldn't be bothered to read paragraph 12. Dead silence again. Mark looked like he wanted the carpet to open up and swallow him whole. And the CEO, he just stood there, breathing through his nose, watching it all burn. No yelling, no theatrics, just ice, just facts. Just a quiet, brutal truth echoing through the glass walls. Mark hadn't fired an employee. He'd fired the very license that kept the firm alive. Mark didn't answer right away, mostly because his face had gone the color of skim milk and his mouth was moving like a broken fax machine, lips twitching, no words forming, just this eerie flapping as if his body was trying to generate sound without his soul's permission. The boardroom stayed still. Not a cough, not a chair squeak, just the CEO's voice, cold and surgical. Mark, would you like to explain to the board why you terminated the only person keeping this company legally operational? There it was. The blade. No dramatics. No raised voice. Just a scalpel slicing through whatever scraps of bravado Mark had left stitched to his overpriced blazer. Mark blinked, mouth still open. You could almost see his brain buffering, spinning the wheel of excuses, scrambling for a scapegoat, a technicality, an intern he could throw under the bus. But nothing came out. Just dead air and regret. Someone's Apple Watch chimed 7:58 p.m. The CEO didn't repeat the question. He didn't have to. Finance director leaned forward, pen tapping silently against a leather notebook. A compliance partner wrote something down. One board member simply turned off her camera and left the Zoom without a word. Mark didn't even notice. The $1 million meter was still running, only now it wasn't revenue. It was bleeding. Bleeding goodwill, trust, capital, client relationships, federal grace periods, the whole damn house. And Mark, he just sat there, slumped in a $4,000 ergonomic chair that couldn't stop the weight of consequences. His tie had loosened. His palms were flat on the table like he needed to ground himself in reality. But it was too late. Reality had already packed its bags and left the room, taking his career with it. The CEO finally turned away from him, speaking not to Mark anymore, but to everyone else. We will begin compliance restoration protocol immediately. Eagle will coordinate with the department to initiate new officer vetting. In the meantime, he paused, letting the silence sharpen the edge. We will conduct a full internal audit of this termination and any associated decisions made without executive or legal oversight. Translation: Mark, we're not just firing you. We're lighting your reputation on fire and sending the ashes to your alma mater with a note. Mark didn't protest, didn't plead, didn't even lift his head. He just sat there, sinking, imploding. 1 hour ago, he was CFO. A man with power, presence, control. Now, he was a ghost in a suit, staring at a contract he never bothered to read, surrounded by people who'd already erased him in their minds. No one offered a hand. No one told him it'd be okay. The last thing he saw before the room emptied was the CEO gently sliding the binder, my binder, back into his briefcase like a sacred object. And then the lights dimmed, and the clock kept ticking, and Mark finally realized he hadn't fired an employee. He'd fired the system, and the system just fired back. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.